I invite you to finish your conversations. Thank you. And okay, so we're doing something slightly different this Sunday morning. I said that to someone earlier on, and they said, "Isn't every Sunday morning slightly different?" And yeah, there's some truth in that. So this Sunday, we're going to do a couple of things. The first thing is we're going to just hear a little bit from Andrew and Kali Strutzenberg. Ali, where did that one come from? It was a mixture of both of you. We're going to hear from Ali. And then we've got a video story from Jess Smith, which will play. And then I'm going to just bring a scripture for 3 minutes. Who said I can't do short sermons? If my kids were here, they would time me. And then they would tell me that I was 3 seconds over. So let me introduce Andrew and Kali Strutzenberg and just explain a little bit about the story. Actually, I'm not going to introduce you guys. You're going to introduce yourselves in a minute, but let me just set the context. So a few years ago, Colin's sitting there when Colin retired. I've been really thinking about COVID, actually, with the sunny weather that we've had five years ago. And actually remembering, I've been re-remembering some of the trauma of that time. Of just, God, that was a difficult time, but the sun shone. And it was around that time that Colin retired, and your dearly beloved wife had just died. And it was a really difficult time. And over those number of years, over those years, and actually a bit before that, because we were aware that this was likely to happen at some point, we've been thinking around how do we resource our community, and particularly a recognition that even with a brilliant leadership team, which there's quite a lot that rests on my shoulders. And a need for others who would kind of come and step into that space. And that's probably been more urgently we've been thinking about that. And I, in my annual review last year with Ashley, who's our chair of trustees, and Keith Short from the network, and Alan Cox wasn't involved in that, but he's been encouraging the same thing, some of you may remember or know. And he's been a great friend and coach to us over a number of years, was really encouraging me to think outside the box, or for us to think outside the box around people who could potentially step into some of that space. And then I've had a developing friendship with Andrew over the last kind of probably 3 years. I've had the joy of meeting Kali in the last 6 to 9 months, which has been fantastic. But Andrew and I were having a conversation about his future, which he maybe say a bit more about in a moment. And it just opened up into a really interesting conversation about is there some kind of connection here out of our friendship with CCE and some of what we're looking for, and maybe some congruence with what Andrew was looking for. And so the plan is that Andrew and Kali will join our community. Andrew brings a whole bunch around mission, which is an area that we really want to press into more, has some skills and gifts that I don't have, which is fantastic, but also will help carry the load. And we're talking about this being a year of discernment. It's discernment for you guys. You might not like us. I know you like me, but are you going to like this lot? And what God is doing amongst us, and discernment for us around, is this a good fit here? So in August, they're going to join us for a year, and we'll see where we go. So this is just a bit of an opportunity to get to know you guys. So the first thing that will be, for anyone who's heard Andrew preach, and as soon as you speak, you're not from these parts. So we'd love just to hear where you're from and what's brought you to Scotland and to Edinburgh in particular. So Kali, are you going to just say us a little bit about kind of your background and where you've come from?
Sure. Yes, we are not from here. We are from the States, in a kind of the Midwest, so Iowa, if anybody knows their U.S. states geography. So pretty central. And actually, I feel like Edinburgh kind of reminds me a little bit of, and kind of Scotland of where we're from. There's a few major cities, and then a lot of it is very rural and farming communities. So we actually both met in high school in photography class. We were sat at the same table. And so we've kind of were friends first for a while, and I thought he was kind of cute, so we kind of developed a bit more of a relationship later. And so we've actually been married 18 years now, 18 and a half, and we have 4 children. They're all born in the States, and so we arrived here actually in the middle of COVID, October of 2020. But kind of, I think, from the beginning of our relationship and when we were together, we just kind of always knew that I think our journey and our path would be one of the ones less traveled. It wouldn't look kind of what the norm might be. I think we tried in every attempt to do that, but just kind of kept finding this pull and desire for something more. And so we always kind of had missions in our mindset, and just kind of wondered what that might look like. Always had also tried to attempt that in many different ways, in lots of different places that we've lived in the past, but never really had found the thing that we felt very sure of. And so kind of after we've done grad school, so I actually have a master's in counseling from a seminary in the States, and Andrew has a MDiv, Master's of Divinity, from the same seminary. So after we did that, and after we had all of our children, we kind of were just like, what is next with life? And so kind of felt also part of our kind of thing that we felt we're interested in and taking note of, I guess, would be that a lot of the people that we found ourselves interacting with and having kind of connection with were people who felt either hurt or just really not quite comfortable in a more traditional setting of church. And so just what does that look like to engage and connect with people who just don't feel as welcome? Because it's been good place for us, but I think just, what does that mean? What does that look like? And so I think that kind of, with missions and that kind of connection and kind of heart for people who maybe feel marginalized or kind of on the outside of church, has really been a little bit more of where we've kind of connected and honed in on more. Yeah. So.
Brilliant. Andrew, I wonder if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, so about 6 or 7 years ago, Kali and I were at a spot. We were both working at a university, and our kids were very young at this point, and we were just kind of going through the dregs of working and taking care of our kids and trying to survive and paying the bills and mowing the lawn and doing all the things that you do. And I remember we just kind of had this moment. We got the kids to bed. It was probably 8:30 or something, and we just kind of slumped into bed, or like into the couch, and we're just like, is this life? Is this what's going on? We've got pretty good jobs. We're near family. Is this it? And I think we both just kind of remembered that there has always been something in our lives about calling us into something deeper, into an adventure life, an adventure in faith. And we just kind of sat on that moment for a while.
You've already said a little bit about kind of what your heart is and your passion for church and leadership and mission and ministry stuff, but I'd just love to hear a little bit more about some of that kind of stuff. What is it that you, this isn't how I framed the question when we were talking about it earlier, but I think it's the same territory. But when you kind of go, I'd love to do that kind of thing, what is it that you really brings you alive?
I think for me, I really just love connecting with people. I feel just kind of building relationship and communities that just really can have I kind of like the word of a posture, of just an openness to see people for who they are and where they're at in their life journey. And I really love to come alongside journeying with people kind of on that road. It's difficult. It's not always easy. But yeah, so I think that's kind of my heart and where my passion is just to kind of be working alongside of people, and I think that's why it lent itself to counseling a bit. However, I just really I'm just loving that part of that, and just having a place where also kind of has that heartbeat of just wanting to not necessarily come from expertise or right or wrong, but just kind of being open to where people are and where they're at.
And I guess that really connects kind of with those who found church perhaps difficult in the past and hurtful, and I really connect with that. I think part of what we're trying to do here is create a safe space for people where perhaps they found church difficult in the past, and so there's a real connection there, and just journeying and walking alongside people.
Yeah.
Andrew, I wonder.
So Kali and I grew up in a town called Urbandale, Iowa, which sounds very idyllic. It's a suburb of Des Moines, kind of a small suburb in a small, kind of fairly insignificant state. Grew up in a very small Baptist church, and attended a small Baptist Bible college after that, and got to about 19 years old, or maybe almost 20, and realized that my world was very small and my faith was fairly small. And I kind of started to realize that there was an incongruence with kind of the Jesus that I had really begun to encounter as a teenager, and was still encountering in Scripture and in my life, and kind of what it meant in those spaces to be a Christian, which really meant like a very narrow form of kind of moralism, listening to certain types of music, attending the right schools and the right sort of society, political beliefs, all this stuff. And it was at that time I started to have kind of a crisis of faith. And really feeling drawn into something deeper, something broader, I think something more beautiful and more challenging. And that's really been the journey for the last 20 years, is being invited just kind of continuously deeper into that space and into different spaces, and finding Jesus in the nooks and crannies and the corners and places where my small world didn't exist at that time. And I realized at some point in time that it really wasn't so much of a crisis of faith that I was having. It was really a crisis of church, because the church that I inhabited, and I'm thankful for that church, because it's a church that taught me to love Jesus and cared for me and my family through my kind of formative years. But it just felt like there was so much more. And there was so much more to find. And so that's been the journey that we've been on. It's taken us on kind of an odd journey, because it's taken us to seminary, to study Scripture, to work in teaching theology at a university and ethics. It's also taken us away from the church to work in entrepreneurship, and more recently in kind of community mission. And at some point, it felt like over the last couple of years, there's been kind of opportunities, and we felt like God was calling us actually now to move back into a space of exploring church and church leadership, and trying to bring this experience into an expression of church that we know we're not ever going to get it right, and we're not ever going to do it perfectly, but following Jesus is really hard. But this is the space where we're supposed to do it, is in a community together. And so that's the church. So we're really, really thankful for the opportunity to to come spend time with all of you, and to spend time at CCE and explore what it means to be the church together here in this place, in this time, with all the challenges and difficulties that brings.
That's amazing. And I guess some of that journey, that crisis of faith, maybe more crisis of church, is perhaps part of where we've kind of connected and found a huge sense of commonality. Not that we necessarily agree with everything, but I think we're asking the same kinds of questions. And they're questions that I think we're asking. What does it mean to be good news people? What is the good news, and how can we represent and look and tell the story of Jesus in a way that's faithful and compelling in our cultural moment? And I think some of those questions are things that you guys are asking as well, where that kind of connection is. I've got a note here saying the internet is down, so if you're online, sorry, but you're probably not going to get that. So I'm not quite sure what to say.
Don't worry.
Don't worry.
We'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. Just as we kind of move towards an end here, just tell us about what the next few months are looking like for you.
So, as we said, we've been here since 2020, and when we arrived here, we were working with a ministry called Soul Food on Easter Road, and particularly a church called Mustard Seed that has been very involved in caring for people kind of up and down Easter Road. And initially, that started really as a kind of a hospitality-based ministry. Had a background in the food industry and loved to feed people. And so it was a great opportunity just to open up space for people who are hungry to come in, have a meal, but also share a bit of life and conversation and friendship. And kind of in the last few years, that's morphed a little bit into being asked to step into more of the leadership role at Mustard Seed Church as it was going through a transition. The priest stepped away, and so for the last 2.5 years, I've been leading that community as well as kind of doing the work that I've been doing with Communitas. But that season has come to an end. We will be appointing a new priest, installing a new priest this coming Tuesday, which is very exciting. So it's been about a 2.5-year vacancy, which is a real long time. And it's been a real wonderful journey to kind of just stick our toes into the water, or maybe get thrust into the deep end of church leadership in a way that we weren't sure we were ready for. But that season is coming to an end. I will be stepping down from my leadership role at Mustard Seed on the 22nd of June. And we are going to spend a bit of time back in the States connecting with family and friends in July. And then we're looking forward to coming back and joining this community in August.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to add, that's one of the things that we're really looking forward to and excited about, being able to be here and be around and to be more engaged and to connect and meet with all of you more. I know Andrew's had the opportunities to be here a few times on a Sunday, and we've kind of showed up with our children every once in a while, but we're excited to make this more of a permanent place.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to you guys being around as well. And I guess part of the conversations we've had is just this growing sense of vocational call to church leadership that you've been experiencing, Andrew, and that theological bit, but also the mission bit, and particularly those that are on the margins, and your heart for those that are on the margins. Just feels like there's some real potential here for us to help, or to journey together, to help nurture mission, but also for you to continue just to explore that vocational call. And that was the initial conversation. And then I've been saying this is buy one, get one free, because you have a conversation with Andrew and you get Kali as well, and which has been amazing. And I think you bring so much that complements what Andrew brings in terms of particularly that kind of heart for people and journeying alongside people, that pastoral counselling stuff. And so I'm really excited about you coming, landing here, beginning of August, finding your feet, and then we'll just see where this goes. And to all of us, I guess the invitation is to open our hearts, to this couple, but there are also some other new people that are kind of connecting in with us at the moment. And so for us to open our community heart and maybe our doors into our houses and just open our hearts to new people that are coming in. Andrew and Kali will be part of the leadership team, not in necessarily a formal sense, because we have to go through a consultation, and that's part of the discernment, I think, for all of us. But they'll lead, nurture mission, get involved in the life of the church, preach, lead, and then we'll see where it goes. So can we give a really warm welcome to Andrew and Kali Strutzenberg. Thank you so much. Excellent. Thank you. Yes. I think I'm on number one now, Ali. Sorry, we've changed microphones. Okay, so we're going to just transition. We're in a little mini-series, which I think the Strutzenberg story actually really fits in with. The mini-series is about following Jesus everywhere, and today we're just thinking a bit about on our doorsteps. And we've got a video interview with Jess Smith. And Jess has been telling some amazing stories over the last kind of wee while. And we were wanting to find a way of just her telling some of these stories of following Jesus everywhere on the doorstep. And I have her permission to say this, but she wouldn't feel very comfortable about doing it live and in person. So we were asking her about other ways of doing it, and she said, I'd be up for doing a video. So that's what we've done. So it's a Zoom call with me again, I'm afraid, sorry. And it's about 20 minutes, and let's hear from Jess.
Well, Smith, and Jess is going to tell us a couple of stories of some things that have been happening in her life over the last wee while, and we've been hearing these stories in a missional greenhouse that we've been doing, and then in one or two other contexts. And so, Jess, we'd love to just hear how God has been using you in just everyday life, and in some respects really ordinary ways, and yet actually there's this extraordinary thing of how God has opened up some doors for you and connected you in different ways. So Jess, we'd love to hear your stories.
Yeah, okay, well, I guess the first story I thought of sharing was from last year. It was just ordinary day. I was on my way to school with my daughter, and there's a lady who lives she did live on the corner of our street with her 3 children, and she had them in the car and was to take them to school. And she was, as we walked past, you could hear her. She was really angry, and she was sort of inside the car, right up close to the face of her son, who's maybe 8, swearing at him and like really angry. And we walked past, and my initial thought was like, my thoughts were just like really judgmental, like, I just thought I would never. I was thinking things like I would never do that. Kind of that sort of vibe, just like, how embarrassing to be doing that in public and that sort of thing. Anyway, I went to school, took my daughter to school, and then I was on the way back, and I went past her house, and so I was thinking about her again. And I had been, I've been listening to the Bible Project Sermon on the Mount podcast last year, and I had been really thinking about or challenged about the way that I do other people, and make seeing other people as less than fully human, which I actually continue to do all the time in my life. I'm very aware that it's not, it's something that I still do. But anyway, so I think that came to mind as I was coming back, and then I felt like God was saying that I should go and knock on her door and offer to give her a hug, because I just felt a sense of that I really love, but God was saying, I really love her and I want you to give her a hug from me. And I was like, I don't really want to go and knock on her door. I found her a bit of a, she's quite, to me, she came across like quite a scary sort of person. So I was apprehensive, but anyway, I did have time to go and knock on her door. So I did. And it was a bit awkward, obviously, starting the conversation, but I sort of said, I felt like I could see you having a tricky morning. I just wanted to come and offer you a hug. And she started to cry, and I started to cry because I've always got to have a cry. If somebody else cries, I'm going to cry. And then I ended up going inside. She invited me into her house, and she, shared about some of the difficult things that were going on in her life. And it wasn't like we suddenly became, we had some amazing connection and became like best buddies or anything in that moment. She still felt really different to me, but like it felt really meaningful. Like that, instead of just judging her, I'd gone and offered what Jesus would offer, something of what Jesus would offer in terms of just bringing some love. And one of the things that emerged was that her washing machine was broken, and she was taking washing up to the school to get some washing done. And anyway, so we started to do her washing for her, and so we'd go back and forth, to each other's front doors and chat on a regular basis, just a little chat to do her, while we were delivering her washing back to her. And I remember one time I opened my washing machine and pulled out a sweater that was hers, and I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was something like, "We are the same," or "We are not so different." And it just again felt a reminder of that challenge that God was giving me to see her in the way that He saw her. A cool thing happened when, it was unfortunate for her that she was hoping to get a washing machine through the council, and then that didn't work out. And Harriet, my husband, and I, we both, we got a bit of extra tax credits that we weren't expecting. And separately, we both were thinking about what we would do with the money, and then came together and we both wanted to get her a washing machine. And that was really fun, like being able to buy her a washing machine. And she was like, at first was like, well, why would you do that? And she was, then she tried to find like the cheapest second-hand, like the worst possible washing machine that we could get there. But she didn't want to be a burden on us, I think. And we were like, no, we want to get, let's get a washing machine from John Lewis. You can get it installed and the old one taken away. And like, it was really lovely to be able to, like, it was a real blessing for us to be able to bless her. And she was like, really, she was kind of like, but you don't know what I spend my money. You don't know how I budget my money. Like, maybe I should have budgeted differently so that I could pay, or maybe I could now be budgeting differently so I could pay for a washing machine. And it was really cool to be like, this is no judgment on how you choose to save or spend your money. Like, this is just a gift. It's like a free gift with no strings attached. Yeah. And it's an expression of, like, because she'd had so many difficult things happening in her life, from difficult people in her life. It was to be able to say to her, like, there's goodness in the world, and there's goodness for you. Yeah. And I had this aspiration to be like, we'll get a family round, and we'll see, like, we'll become best buddies. We'll, do all these connecty things. And then my own life, different things happened, and it isn't, we got the washing machine, and then we didn't actually spend that much time with her. Things drifted, and then she ended up getting a new home and moved away. So it was like, but yeah, it was really, that was the first story that I thought I'd share.
That's amazing. And it's just sowing seeds of kindness and goodness, isn't it, in people's lives?
Yeah.
That's, that's amazing. And there's another story, isn't there, about school?
Yes. So the other story was, so some people might remember that last year I was organising a prayer space at my daughter's primary school. And that was exciting, the way that opened up. And then while I was around the time, when I was researching to do that, I saw a picture on the Prayer Spaces in Schools website that was of a high school. It was like a communal area in a high school, and it had a big net hanging from one of the walls. And next to the net was the question, if God's real and you could ask whatever you wanted, what would you ask? And then there were like slips of paper, and the young people could like peg their questions on, and there were tens and tens of questions on it. And it looked really cool. And I just had the thought of, wouldn't that be amazing in my kids' high school? I would love that if that was there. And then there was a new head teacher coming to the high school, and everyone was like, well, what's the new head teacher going to be like? And so I was speaking to a friend of mine who works at the school. There's another school mum. And she said she'd had an initial conversation with him, and he described the school as a sleeping giant. And obviously he was speaking like in academic and the potential of children and stuff at the school. But what stirred inside me was just like a longing that would be a statement of the faith of the young people at that high school. Wouldn't it be amazing if it was like a giant of faith rose up in that school? I just thought that really stayed with me as it just kind of rooted itself in me a bit, that imagination of that. And then so I was kind of thinking, I don't know what I could do to make a prayer space happen at the high school. There were a few different possible directions, like connections, but nothing obvious. And then one of my own kids is being chronically unwell and was actually meant to start the high school and he kind of started a little bit. And so I actually got to meet the head teacher several times because of the situation of our family. And I spent a lot more time just in the school, but still no obvious. Well, to be honest, I wasn't really thinking about the prayer space anymore. It wasn't, it just wasn't really on my radar, particularly back of my mind. So just before Christmas, the thought about the prayer space was on my mind, came to mind again. And I prayed, I don't even know a teacher who's a Christian in the school. So God, show me a Christian teacher if you want me to do something. And within that week, we went to a carol service, an evening carol service we'd been invited to by some friends. And my son, who's not that well, he only lasted for the first couple of carols and one reading. But when we came out, he said, well, that was my English teacher who did the reading. And I was like, oh my goodness. So that was that felt like an answer to that prayer. I was like, oh, there's a Christian teacher. So then in January, I don't do anything fast, so everything takes time. But about a month later, in January, I emailed this teacher, and I just said, I don't really know why I'm emailing, but I prayed this prayer. I'm just wondering if you've got any thoughts on prayer space or anything. And she emailed back and said a few things, but the thing that sort of struck me was that one of the deputy heads was a Christian. And so I thought, I'll email him next. So a week or two later, I wrote him an email. I hadn't actually sent it, but I'd set out, as I was writing it, I started describing the net, the fishing net thing hanging from the wall, and that concept to try and give a sense of what I had in my imagination. Because I think prayer space, people can think you're talking about a really Christian-y thing that will attract Christians, whereas in my imagination, it's very much more like it's asking spiritual questions to get that any young person of any faith or none could engage with. So I explained the thing with the fishing net, and yeah, but I hadn't sent the email. And then I went over. I got distracted by something else, didn't do it. A few days later, I went over to Emily in Grey Counter's house for a catch up, and we were chatting about other things. But then towards the end of the evening, I was telling her, because her kids are at the same high school, and so I was being enthusiastic and telling her, about what had been happening. And she said, "Oh, you should get. Why don't I call Luke down, her son? Could tell him about it, see if he's got any thoughts on it." So Luke came downstairs, and I was explaining to him, and again to try and get across what it was I described as net, and the question on the wall. And Luke said, I was like, "Oh, that's funny, because this week I've been painting the school cafe, and they've just told me that I can do whatever I want on the wall there." and actually the cafe's a nautical theme.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. I know. I was like, and he just had a conversation with Justin, or recently had a conversation with Justin about sharing faith, and Justin had been talking about asking questions, and so it really all landed with Luke as to what, just what's happening in his life. And I was like, my mind was blown, because I was like, oh my goodness, I guess because in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I don't understand how I could have anything to do with this prayer space right now, but I'll just pray. And then you've opened a little door with that teacher, so I'll just keep moving through it. And then it's like, oh, it's not me who's organising, or who's the person who can do that. There's other people. There's Luke, and there's the deputy head and the head of English. There's these other people who maybe are the next people, the people who are doing the next steps. But I can't believe I got to be part of that just by being available, and making small steps. And Luke also mentioned this other area on the wall, like in passing as we were talking, like a big white space that he was thinking they should have a mural on. And I found myself, thinking on that afterwards. And I mean, who knows whether anything will come of this, but the thought came to my mind again, just sort of trying to be open, I suppose, or I was just thinking, and the Mary Oliver prayer that has as a final line, something like, "And what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life?" And I was thinking, that would be really cool on a school wall, and that whole poem would be really. But and so I messaged Luke just ignore this if it's not relevant, but that piece of white space. And he messaged back saying, "Oh, we're just looking for a quote for the wall right now, so I'll throw that in," and because that's a lovely quote. And it's just, it's like, it just all it feels really exciting to be to when you make yourself available to see God using you. It's like, and just to be part of a bigger, because I'm like, I feel really invested in what is happening there in the school now, and I find myself, it's not that I think, oh well, that's my bit done now. I'm like, God, is there anything else? What do you want me to do? Is there something else to do next? And it's not like you hear some booming voice, obviously, that's like, but it's just the next thing that feels like inspiring inside me, and like just trying to push forward with that and see what comes of it. So yeah, that's the second story.
That's amazing. And I guess one of the things that strikes me there in both stories actually is this sense that the story's unfinished, but you've had a part to play somewhere in the midst of this unfolding story. And there's probably some stuff that's gone before, and there's some stuff that will come after, but there's something that you've played in both these stories with your neighbour, and then in the prayer space that needs others, in a sense, to get involved and pick up the baton and make stuff happen. But you've had a moment of quite a key interaction with different people. Yeah. Something's happened.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So just could you just say a little bit more as we come to an end about you use that word availability.
Yeah.
So, and you've been just thinking about that word. So could you just say a little bit more about that as we come to an end?
Yeah, well, I guess I heard something recently about the parable of the talents, and it was talking about it was something on Instagram, I think, and it was someone talking about the different people in that story get given different amounts of talents, but the real key is about using what doing something, investing what you have, and I feel that with my life, like maybe in the past in my life, I had some, I don't know, like you have ideas about changing the world, or when you're in your 20s, maybe like big bold ambitions or whatever, and life goes on, and I feel like, oh, my life is very ordinary in a way. It's just very normal, and it's quite little in a way what the things that I can bring, but I may be small compared to some of the people I look at around me and can perceive as having more talents or whatever. But I feel that my experience has been that as I'm giving, just doing what I can in my flawed human way to give who I am to God, he does cool stuff. Like he uses it, and beautiful things happen when we make ourselves available and bring it's like every day you've actually got I don't know, so many hours in every day to choose what you're thinking about and what you're every conversation. I don't know, we've all got so much that we can make available to God, and the more we make available, the more beauty we see, and the more freedom we feel within ourselves and know within ourselves. And I feel excited about my small but beautiful flawed, broken life, and what God's doing. Yeah,
amazing. And it seems to me so. This is the kind of stuff that God does. He takes some actually just really ordinary things, like bread and wine, really ordinary stuff, and yet somehow, when we make those ordinary things available to God, our lives, our everyday lives, are taking our kids to the school, and what we might do on the journey home, or sending an email to a teacher, or whatever it is, just really, really ordinary things that I guess many of us could really identify with. But when we open ourselves up, God takes these ordinary things, and there's something of his grace and his presence which transforms something that's very ordinary into something that's really extraordinary, when his grace kind of meets the ordinariness of our lives. So Jess, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing these stories with us.
I know Jess is not here, but why don't we just give her a round of applause? And Abby, I wonder if you could come up. So this is going to be the shortest little thought for the day that I've ever done. I was just reading Luke 17 this week, and there were 3 words in the story where Jesus comes and encounters 10 people with leprosy, and he instructs them to go to the priests, and the text says, as they went, they were cleansed of their leprosy. And sometimes Jesus does a miracle there and then, but sometimes it's only as we go that God does something amazing. It's in the going that something amazing happens. Caroline, 2 weeks ago in this little mini-series, talked about we're all sent. It's God's mission. He goes before us and he invites us to participate in this mission. As they went, sometimes amazing things happen in the going. And then I was struck by the they as they went. So last week, Poppy and the students were talking about new beginnings and starting afresh as students and the importance of community. It was as they went. And it was as they went, the miracle happened. So there's 3 questions here that just in the final few minutes of this morning that I'd like to just leave with us. Where are you going? Or where have you been sent? Who are you going with? Where's your community? And what are you looking for God to do as they went? That was less than 3 minutes, right? Amazing. I can do 40 minutes or I can do 2. Why don't we stand? And I would like to just invite us as we come to the end here. We've heard from the Strutzenbergs who've gone. You know, they've been sent. And at the moment, they've been sent to us. Amazing. We've heard from Jess. Just the courage to knock on the door of someone that you find a little bit scary and give them a hug, eh? Not sure I'd do that. Where are you going? Who are you going with? What are you looking for God to do? So as we just finish this morning, let's just muse on all that we've heard. Maybe these questions just help us think about our sentness, our responding to the nudgings of the Spirit to bring beauty, good news into our world.